Welcome to the Beyond Atheism podcast with me, Nathan Alexander, and my co-host, Todd Tavares. Moving beyond questions of God's existence, this podcast asks what atheists should be doing next in a godless world.
Today, we continue to delve into the world of non-theistic worldviews beyond atheism. We're talking about religious naturalism and joined by Carol Wayne White. She's the presidential professor of philosophy of religion at Bucknell University and author of numerous essays on the creative intersections of critical theory and religion, process philosophy, and religious naturalism. Her most recent work is Black Lives and Sacred Humanity toward an African American Religious Naturalism. Welcome to Beyond Atheism, Carol.
Well, thank you for the very warm welcome and for the lovely introduction.
Thanks, Carol, for coming on. I think we usually just start by asking about your background. So were you raised religious, and what label would you put on your religious views now? Like if someone asked you, what is your religion?
Okay. With the first part of the question, yes, I was definitely raised within a religious household. Roman Catholic, went to parochial school, was taught by the nuns, and then I entered college and went to Loyola College and encountered the Jesuits. And so I have a very rich background in Roman Catholicism and was a mystic, though, was not your traditional Roman Catholic, in that I never embraced the guilt that people joke about in a popular sense, but was very much in love with. There was this book written by, I forget the name of the scholar, but Love of Learn and Desire for God was basically the theme of my childhood coming up. And the God part of that was just this fascination with what I now call the more of life, that there was something for me that I was charmed, enchanted by as a youngster. I was asking these types of questions, what I now call basic existential questions around origins, destiny, purpose, meaning. Believe it or not, age 8, 9, 10, I was asking those questions. And so studying theology and philosophy and English literature at Loyola really helped me to frame certain types of questions and to think about the questions that I was asking. I had a crisis of faith when I went to graduate school up in Boston. I went to Loyola in Maryland. There are several Loyolas in the United States. But I then went up to graduate school and had a crisis of faith. And all of that lovely theological background I had, I began to question.
Mm-hmm.
And it was good, very, very good. And was very much more still interested in what I would call the big questions of life, but the theistic framework no longer worked for me. It was no longer appealing to me or even interesting or intelligible. And that's why I do call it a lovely existential crisis. So that's part of my background. And what was the second part of the question?
Just how would you define your religion now, or what would you say if someone said,
Yeah,
what is your religion?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and students want to know, and a lot of people do ask me. I call myself actually a naturalist and a humanist. I am a humanist and I'm a naturalist. And in saying that, basically, I'm all about understanding values. I think that humans are value-laden organisms, that what we're calling religion, traditionally conceived as basically human values that we superimpose upon the world. And for me, the basic values that I think are important are about relationality, about our connection to the natural worlds of which we are a part, and transformation, making it a better world for all forms of life, sentient beings, if you will. And so you can see the humanist part and the
Mhm.
naturalism in that
Mhm.
definition.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't like to be associated with religion per se
Mhm.
Mm.
because of the historical, um, because of the term itself. It's a very vexed, problematic term. I think that's weighted down by years and years of thinking and valuing that I find to be somewhat problematic. At the same time, I'm what a lot of people consider to be the theistic, atheistic, agonistic relationship. I'm not into that either. I am just, I think any sort of dogmatism, whether you call it theistic or atheistic, for me is also problematic because they all are, as far as I'm concerned, ways of trying to understand who we are as human beings and our relationship to that which is more and other than us and what makes sense to us as we try to orient ourselves in the cosmos, or at least this particular universe of which we find ourselves.
So you made that distinction between the theistic thinking and non-theistic thinking. And we've recently like just been introduced to this idea of like and even of materialist religions, right? Ideas where
Mm-hmm.
we have
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it rejects supernatural and it's focused on here and now. And I think I don't want to put words in your mouth or misunderstand things. You seem to define religion as a way of making meaning. Is
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, is
Mm-hmm.
that what you would give it like the basic definition of what a religion would be?
Yeah, I think it's I think if you actually, if I, I'm a philosopher of religion, and if you look at some of the etymology of the term religion, I think it might be from the Latin to bind oneself. I think that's one of the root meanings of the term, and for me, it means basically that humans have this capacity to connect. And so, for me, religion, if I'm going to use the term, it's about understanding how we connect to others, not just other human beings, but to other forms of life, to other processes, etc. And in that way, it's positive for me because it means that it disrupts any type of illusion of separatedness or being alone or being at the center of the universe. So yes, I do think religion is about certain sets of values, but for me, the basic key values are really about connection, transformation.
And could you just like really briefly like the sort of negative connotations that you
Mm-hmm.
see with
Mm-hmm.
like religion, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is it like how to sort of compare and contrast or at least give us the what you're trying to get away from.
Right.
What is bad about this sort of theistic religious dogmatic religion? What's wrong with that
Mm-hmm.
form of
Mm-hmm.
moral
Mm-hmm.
making and that sort of
Yeah.
relation
Yeah.
building?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it has, when one looks at religion as a set of beliefs that you can then either rationally support or not, or when you begin to think of religion as revelatory, coming from something other than humans, to me, those are some of the negative connotations of it. I actually think of religion as a mode of being in the world. It's a way of being in the world. It's more of an existential understanding in which you open yourself up to life and to what life offers at any given moment. And I think humans have responsibility to open themselves up to what is, and this is where the naturalism part comes into play, and not only open ourselves up to it, but then to interpret what is, and then to try to enhance or contribute to what is in positive ways. So you can see some of my what traditionally is called liberative dimensions coming out. If religion is going to do anything good in the world, as far as I'm concerned, given how I've defined it, it is going to help leave the world when one enters the world, that your actions, your behaviors, your contributions as a species, as a group, as a culture is leaving it a better place than how it was when you emerged or entered it. So, and I think religion can play that role It often has not, as we all know,
Yes.
the histories and all.
Mhm.
But I think when people begin to think that this is something more than just human effort, that's where the revelatory, traditional theistic, or when people begin to think that their way of trying to interpret whatever is the only way, that's where the dogmatism comes into play. Those are some of the negative connotations that I think a lot of people reject, and a lot of young people reject as well.
Yeah. I guess we've already sort of touched on it a little bit, but maybe just to clarify, like, what exactly you mean by religious naturalism?
Okay, good. And before I do so, Nathan, I do want to go back to one thing I think I
Oh, okay.
heard
Oh,
Todd say around materialism.
oh, yeah.
Religious naturalism, as I define it, is part of the new materialism, where the focus is on the here and now, on what the scientific worldview affirms as matter, as material, etc. So anything that there's nothing beyond nature, and nature is actually a set of properties of what were considered to be fluid. They change, whatever. And so, for me, religious naturalism then is a set of naturalistic assumptions about the world and human beings, in which we try to understand what is, and that's where the naturalism part comes into play. The religious part has to do with the values that are embedded in how you understand the natural world around you. Because I come from a school of thought, and this is what religious naturalism also augments, that humans are value laden organisms. If you look at how we're defined by way of evolutionary theory and how our brains work, we actually have the capacity to construct values. But I think there's intrinsic value to things beyond how humans interpret value to other things. So I'm not saying that it's with humans that value is part of the world around us. I'm going back to what Darwin said, that every species has its own sort of adaptive value, how it engages the environment around it. And there's a certain type of practical valuing going on. And I think humans, as another type of species, also adapts to its environment and tries to make sense of it. And that's the value part. And so for me, religious naturalism is how humans actually adapt to the world around us, interpret the world around us, try to make sense of it, but also engage it and have what I would hope to be lovely forms of connection with other beings, and also intra connectivity between and among human beings as well.
So, from the sound of it, it sounds like you take what we know about the world and humans'
Mm-hmm.
place in it
Mm-hmm.
and use that to intentionally create the values. Is that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Yeah,
how.
what we know, and the values come easy because we cannot help but evaluate the world. We cannot help but interpret the world. We cannot help but classify. I mean, that's the way our brains are structured. So the valuing part is actually an innate predisposition that I argue in my published work comes to us by way of evolutionary theory. And part of that is a sort of it comes out of what I call a constitutive relationality. Humans are not at the center, but we are very much a part of many fascinating natural processes. And how we make sense of that is part of that valuing that we're talking about.
And it changes as we progress then as well.
Of course, because the more knowledge, of course, as the more knowledge that comes to us, it has to change. And religion, by the way, if you look at you all, I assume you know this, the history of religion, when people do comparative religion, they look at how religion has evolved. You know why? Because humans evolve, and
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
humans continue to try to make sense of the world around them. One
Mm.
of the earliest forms was animism, and
Hmm.
and a lot of people actually think of religious naturalism as a contemporary type of animism,
Mm.
because of its focus on nature,
Hmm.
but it
Mm.
really is a way of understanding the world scientifically with a certain type of emotional response to that scientific knowledge. It really is grounded in scientific theory, but how we respond to it is where you get a lot of the so-called religious language, like terms like awe and wonder and beauty and justice and all of those humanistic philosophical terms. So we're combining both of those together with religious naturalism. Some people have actually argued that Einstein is somehow, well, Einstein in particular was a religious naturalist, the way he, even though he used the he used the God word,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
but when
Yes.
in some
Yeah.
of his interviews, he actually qualified what he meant by
Yeah.
God. It
Mhm.
was not the supernatural God at all.
Mhm.
So a lot of humanistically oriented scientists are religious naturalists.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And it's not just sort of phenomenological. It's not just
Hmm.
through what we experience. It has to be informed more by what we know about the world, not just
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly right. And that's why I said it's grounded in scientific theory. And that's why it changes. Whatever it's similar to the traditional notion of what metaphysics used to be. Well, traditional metaphysics was always grounded in what the physics of the world was saying. Aristotelian physics were based, on Aristotelian thought or theology. Aquinas was based on Aristotle's view of the world, the physics, the cosmos, and all like that. So in this case, though, religious naturalism takes what we consider to be the physical world, reality, and we then make certain assumptions about it based on that knowledge, and we respond to it with these particular values and all like that. So it's kind of simple in a way, easy, but a lot of people get really hung up on the religious word
Yes.
because
Right.
they
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
associate it with belief in this or dogmatic theological stuff, and that's not what we're doing at all or
Mhm.
espousing.
Yeah. Do you think religious naturalism is compatible with atheism, or yeah, I'll say that compatible.
Why don't you define atheism and then I
Okay.
can?
Oh,
Uh,
burn.
um, I'll say not believing in God or gods. That's how I'll define it.
Yes,
Okay.
in that way, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, if one, yeah, because that's what I call traditional supernaturalism or
Okay.
theism.
Hmm.
That the position that reality is best explained by something beyond the natural world, especially a being, a personal being. Definitely, religious naturalism rejects that. It's not at all grounded in that traditional term. So yeah, and some religious naturalists, though, don't like the word atheism because of some contemporary atheists who are not open to what we're calling religious in the more expansive way that I'm talking about, that reductionistic type of atheism. Who is it? Is it Richard? Who's the
Richard
uh,
Dawkins.
Dawkins. Yeah,
Dawkins? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
that's is actually that form. I think of atheism as a caricature of a healthy, robust form of atheism, in my
Mm,
opinion. So yeah,
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something we often get hung up on too,
yep,
the idea of the like
right,
kind of big A atheism and small A atheism.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm,
But
right,
actually, so one of the contemporary sort of dimensions with that is when you have the sort of big tent atheism that includes like agnostics, the Dawkins, but as well as agnostics, people who either don't know or don't think knowing is possible, with irreligious people, with people who just were born without a religion and never had any. And then there's another group which is spiritual but not religious.
right, right, yeah,
So
yeah,
now I'm curious as to how that fits in, because especially if you're gonna if we think about like animism, I do see how animism can be seen as like religious naturalism, right? Where we but it's very spiritual.
an early form of it, right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Is there a
right, right.
spirit? Do you see spirituality in religious naturalism?
And again, Todd, I will have to ask you what you mean by. You know why? I actually
Spiritual.
have
Yeah.
written articles on these
Okay.
terms,
Yeah.
Okay.
and their spirituality is as bad as religion
Yes.
Y-
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
atheism
Yes.
Mhm.
because it has and it goes back in time. But let me again, if you could answer that because I do think it is a type of spirituality, but it depends on how you're defining spirituality.
Yeah, totally. Yes, you are a professor of philosophy. I
I
can
am.
tell that.
I
And
feel like I'm talking
this is
one of my
also,
students.
yeah. When they do
Define your terms.
define the terms, I mean, first thing, the it's a problem with when they do these surveys because there is no
Yeah.
clear meaning. But
Right.
I mean, if we adapt it to, like, if we draw from animism, at least to make this point, because I think the, like, that very specifically is this sort of like other realm, right? The spirit of the forest, right? That it has this life force that is outside of itself, that's beyond our plane of knowledge. Like, that would be, I think, the more specific form. But if people are coming to this as like, well, I don't believe that there's, a spirit force of the forest, but they might identify something with your notion of the more. So that might be it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
Mm-hmm.
find, like, maybe it would just be if you could define the idea of the more, or differentiate animism from a more materialist concept, a more materialist worldview?
So what is the basic question, Todd?
Great,
Please.
great point.
I'm
Um, okay, so the thing with spirituality, I wanted to
Spirituality,
know
right?
what if this
Yeah.
religious naturalism
Mm-hmm.
has room for
Can be seen.
spirituality.
Right. Right. Okay.
And
So.
maybe in both of these, if you could address it in both terms,
Mm-hmm.
the specific and the broad sort of
Mm-hmm.
spirit of.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So. Right. So the reason I did ask you to define it is because you're absolutely right, especially among a generation of young people, 18 to 22 or so. As you know, the Pew Foundation has been doing these surveys on religious pluralism in the United States. And they have created this term NONE,
Mhm.
nuns,
Yes.
Yeah.
for this generation of young people who say they do not identify with any traditional religious tradition. And so nuns actually consider themselves to be spiritual, and that word it encompasses a number, a plurality of different positions. The way I teach a course called Not Religious but Spiritual, in which
Okay.
I've had
Mm.
students explore this. So for me, the word spirituality, a contemporary understanding of it, as opposed to the older notion that it is about some non-material reality. I consider spirituality to convey all-encompassing reality in which you feel you're connected to. And in that sense, as we know, even within the scientific worldview, there's a lot we don't know about the natural world. So it allows for openness to what some people traditionally call mystery. I associate the word the more with that. In other words, human knowledge is limited as far as this is why science is so fascinating, because we're discovering more and more about the universe that we inhabit. And now we know there might be even other universes out there, but we're discovering so much more. And so, because we are limited, our knowledge will continue to evolve and grow and expand, I think. And in that way, it allows for spirituality to be an alternative way of understanding your exploration of all that is. And if the current understanding of all that is X, then spirituality is your desire to be in connection with that X, however you defined it and all. So religious naturalism can definitely align with spirituality when you define it in that way. As I said, I use the word the more to talk about that in a sense. Also, I think that spirituality is plausible for religious naturalism because of the valuing part. It's not nihilistic. It's not religious naturalism is not a view that says, well, you can't really know all that there is, therefore you're just going to give up on blah, blah, blah. No, religious naturalism has a positive proclivity, as I explained in the beginning, about transforming of self and other, in such a way that you try to improve things in the world. And that's, again, that brings in some of the humanistic, I think, elements of it. So for me, spirituality is really about a way of connecting with all that is, that it changes your most radical behaviors, because when you're aligned with all that is, it motivates you to behave in a certain way, and it makes clear your values to you, and in that way religious naturalism can be a type of spirituality. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it does. It helps me understand spirituality
Mm,
better because I,
yeah.
I have had that conversation with people who actually don't necessarily identify as spiritual but not religious, but kind of are in practice. And
Mm-hmm.
they have a lot of difficulty defining that sense that they have that there's something else out there. Right? That
Mm-hmm.
that more, the way that
Mm-hmm.
you put it.
Well, the more is we're a part of the more, and I wish I could remember. I actually have this in one of my articles. I don't have it in front of me. I have this very beautiful definition of spirituality that was similar to what I was trying to articulate earlier. But it is about alignment with what you consider to be really real. And so, in this context, as we're talking about religious naturalism, if nature is all that there is, if nature is the ultimate reality, then religious naturalism is a type of spirituality that says you want to be aligned with all that is with nature.
I mean, is it
Yeah.
fair to think to in this worldview conceptualize
Hmm.
nature as a higher power?
I don't like the word higher power because that makes it subjective. You see the power, higher power. I don't like those terms. For me, they don't work because it begins to creep into the God
Yeah.
language,
Mhm.
Yes.
and for me, why not just nature is pluralistic, nature is multifarious, nature is so much more than we can even think about. If you really, I mean, all these traits and possibilities, it evolves. Exactly, so it's not a static thing. Yeah, and we are a part of, we ourselves are our nature itself. So it's more than just something out there. It's this fascinating matrix of processes
Right.
that
Where
has,
power is decentralized and it
yeah, and
it
power,
exists
yeah, power, yeah.
yeah, it
It
exists
takes,
in the network, in our connection.
exactly, and the power is basically the connections between the various processes, if you will. Yeah, but it's not that top down. That's why I don't like higher power, because it gives, for me, it gives you the feeling that there's a apex, and then it trickles down to, no, it's more of an ecological sort of metaphor where everything that is part of this that we're calling the natural world.
Because
You know,
there
it,
isn't that one unified central force.
exactly, and it's not unified. It's both. It's interconnected, but it's also multifarious. I mean, it's dynamic, and it changes, and it's fascinating. This is why it's usually really incomprehensible if you think about it. And so, the best scientists will say that at any given moment, there's always something we don't know at any given moment, right? So, for me, religious naturalism is open to that. It's aligned with that beautiful spirit of science. That why do you want to try to reduce that which is real to your contemporary classification of it? It will always exceed what you think it is, because of at least how we understand evolutionary theory, and even the physical world through physics and all, and even what some of my scientist friends think about when they talk about the quantum world, that goes beyond even this three-dimensional world, that what goes beyond the Newtonian physics that we live out of, but we know that there are these subatomic particles, there are these fundamental elements of life that the naked eye can't see, can't whatever. And that's that part that allows you to say, oh, wow, wow,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
right.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think and that like you say, that's I think that's even more wondrous and mysterious, than you might get in sort of traditional theistic religions.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why, again, for me, religious naturalism hits it on the nail because if you really do understand, and some of the theories that are part of the scientific worldview, you can't help but just be humbled and overwhelmed with a sense of wonder and awe and wow and even and then when you think about human beings and our capacity to even absorb some of this, you
Mm.
can't you
Yes, right,
even
exactly.
and
Yeah,
more awe.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And
Yeah.
think
yeah.
about this, because one of my subspecialties is the human animal connection. Don't you think it's fascinating that we can connect to other species? It's just
Yeah.
you think about even the way we've domesticated certain species and have these deeply emotional connections to our dogs, our cats, for me, parrots. And it's just mind-boggling that not only can we connect to other human beings, and just connecting to another human being around the issue of love is mind-boggling, but then when you go beyond that and think about our capacity to relate to other species, wow. So there's just so much, and that's why I love religious naturalism, because it allows you to think in that way and to appreciate those capacities and what they suggest about existence itself.
It's always like amazed me and kind of confounded me that like we can know someone,
I
right? Like
know.
we like
I know. I
we're like
agree, Todd. That's what we think we know, and that's the part. I mean, because assume we all have been in relationships, or we have relationships now, and on a day-to-day basis, it's just for me mind-boggling when you look at a person, you say, I know, you think you know that person. There's always
right.
something
Yeah.
more. Whether and that could
Yeah,
be a
that's true.
family member, that could be a lover, that could be, a co-worker. It's just mind-boggling to me when you say, I know, and so yeah, I agree with you. And to me, that's the beauty of this type of thinking. You can see I'm getting excited
Yeah.
Yeah.
because this is
Okay,
because
well,
this is what religious naturalism is about. It helps you to think through these types of categories, assumptions, ideas, and to just respond with a sense of wow,
yeah. But
yeah.
so Carol, is this a sort of individual project, like something that we as an individual, someone who thinks in this worldview as a religious naturalist, we have to contemplate every day? Like we read a magazine article and we think about what it means for our morality, what ought we do? Or is this something that science will give us this direct answer, right? This is what our morality needs to be. Now that we know this, does it direct us to particular actions that are right or wrong? Or is this so is it an individual project, or is it something that's a total project and it always gives us an absolute answer?
So religious naturalism is not like traditional religions in that you would say that these are the doctrines that you then must ascribe to. It really is a worldview, and it really is. So, a worldview means that it's up to each individual to determine for him or herself how she or he or they will respond to the knowledge that comes about by way of religious naturalism. So if there's anything that religious naturalists share, it is the truth of nature that's given to us through the scientific worldview. Once you affirm that, then you have many different responses to that in terms of how you're going to live out your daily values or what you consider to be convictions or commitments to that particular scientific worldview. So it's both of those in a way, Todd, in that there's no I'm part of Religious Naturalist Association, and we're trying to. We had the most difficult time trying to actually describe the many types of religious naturalists because it is a global phenomenon. It's emerging, and it's becoming a much more plausible worldview for a lot of people today who are seeing the damage that traditional religion has done, and people who are very, very much concerned about ecological crisis that we're in. And yet, at the same time, religious naturalists our association does not tell people this is how you ought to live, and this is it's up to you as to how you. So in that way, it's not that traditional religious doctrinal approach that says these are the XYZs of what we're all about and all. So yeah, it's and in that way, a lot of people are might be turned off by it because some
Uh,
people want to be told
yes, right.
how they ought to
Yeah,
live
Yeah,
and all.
yeah.
yeah.
And so in that, and so it's interesting, yeah. But it's more of a, it's, I'm sorry, it's more of a, I would say, a intellectual worldview. And some of my students actually, I teach a course in religious naturalism at Bucknell, and a lot of my students are saying they think it's for the elite ones, so those who are college educated, who know about scientific theory. And I said that may be true to some extent. I said, but when you start talking to people, and when any person who is at least minimally grounded in scientific theory and understand it can be a religious naturalist. You don't have to have a PhD in this or that, whatever, but you cannot escape understanding some of the basic notions of what science is telling us about the contemporary world.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if is there a sort of a move to create institutions? I mean, we've in the past episodes, a theme that keeps sort of coming up is creating ritual beyond atheism, because it does seem like this is something, I guess, that traditional theistic religions, I suppose, do to some extent well. I guess, I mean, having these rituals does seem to be quite important for many people, and I wonder, is there something in religious naturalism that can fulfill that need?
Yeah, yeah, that's an excellent question, as all of your questions have been. But the reason I said that was excellent, just recently, a group of us who are religious naturalists who are part of RNA did a conference at Star Island in New Hampshire. Every year, there's this Institute for Religion in the Age of Science, IRIS, and that's one of my professional organizations. And they hosted this conference on naturalism, and I'm also a member of RNA, Religious Naturalist Association. So a group of religious naturalists did a presentation on naturalism to open people up to it. And we had one of our members talk about rituals within religious naturalism. And basically, what his name is Todd McAllister, he basically said that the rituals that you might associate with religious naturalism are ones that people almost do every day, like sitting out gazing at the moon and reflecting on that. Or there are what a lot of people would call so-called pagan traditions, but we don't use the word ritual per se, but there are ways in which religious naturalists come together. Say if you have a friend who likes birding, watching birds. If you A lot of religious naturalists live near, well, not a lot, a number of us live near the ocean, walking the beach every day. I do beach strolls every morning, contemplating existence. That can be considered a ritual. Getting together with others and having wonderful conversation, and laughing and having joy about this very moment, that could be seen as a ritual. But it's not, so it's not, as I said, explicitly ritualized in the way that you go to mass and at this particular time. But every day or every hour or even every moment of your existence can be a type of ritual for you if that's what you want to do. If you practice mindfulness, that can be a type of ritualized behavior in which you pause to take stock of the present moment and all like that. Your connection with your animal, other animal kin, can be a type of ritual. So yes, as you know, I think some certain anthropologists have actually argued that humans are ritualized beings, that we have a need, and that's the way our brain is structured. So religious naturalism can adapt to that need for us to ritualize, our existence from minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, weekly, whatever. But they're not categorized as I would say, as explicitly as you have within Christianity,
Right,
Judaism,
right.
things like that. Yeah.
Mm. Hmm.
So, Carol, one other thing, it's kind of related to ritual,
Oh
is the
yeah, good.
sacred,
Yeah,
which
yeah, yeah.
you say that humans are sacred. Religious naturalism places us in this sort of network of connected beings, but in that you see the humans as sacred,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
humanity is sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Can you walk us through that a little bit? Does this sort of give privilege to human
Mm-hmm.
animals, or is
Mm-hmm.
there
Mm-hmm.
something else happening here?
Okay. And I do want to answer that, Todd. But before I do, I realized there was something I missed about the ritual component, and I'll just want to go back to that quickly. Yeah, that there are a number of musicians, artists, and poets that religious naturalists point to help people think about how you can also ritualize your behavior. And around poetry in particular, poets like Mary Oliver, Walt Whitman, they are poets that a lot of religious naturalists read, and there are so many others and all. So there are even musicians who sing to the cosmos and compose songs to the cosmos, and artists. So there's a lot of artistic, aesthetic components to that ritualizing as well. I wanted to throw that in. So now to try to address your sacred question, yeah, that's part of the title of my book, Black Lives and Sacred Humanity. But I define sacred in a particular way. So instead of asking you to define it, I'm just going to define
Okay. Yeah.
it myself. To me, the word sacred has to do with a particular awareness and embracing of human relationality. And so when I say that humans are sacred, what I'm suggesting is that there's a wholeness to our being when we recognize that we are interconnected, that there's no such thing as the isolated human. So it's not that traditional notion of the sacred as some supernatural layer or whatever. It's totally naturalized to some extent. And the reason I like the word sacred in that context is that it says that there's something unique about humans understanding and embracing the fact that we are connected to other beings. Evolution has definitely given us this propensity to be aware of our existence and to reflect on our existence. I mean, we can't deny that. The fact that we can do that, though, does not make us better, ontologically better or superior to other beings. So for me, the sacrality is not a certain type of ontological superiority. It's just a natural fact that we are just not driven by instinct. We actually have the capacity to pause and reflect and to respond in a certain way. And that's what I'm calling the sacred, you know. And in allowing for that is not what I would call that reductionistic type of naturalism, where we think we're just describing the world and we're not responding to it with a sense of awe and wonder, etc., and even to ourselves.
Well, I think as usual, we've sort of like have so many questions we want to ask, but we never quite get to all of them.
No, nowhere near it.
And
We're
I
just
see the
scratching the
time
surface
too.
here,
Yeah,
Carol.
I
Yeah.
see the time
yeah,
too. Wow,
Yeah.
that went
Yes.
fast.
yeah.
It
Wow. Yeah.
always.
Yeah. So we should move on to our lightning round. And oh, I guess maybe we can get to some of our questions in the bonus section too for patrons. So, but anyway, yeah. So we'll move on to our lightning round called Can a
Okay.
true atheist? But we'll sort of change it for
Yeah.
you to be Can a true religious naturalist? So just sort of short answers, and maybe we can sort of follow up. Um, so, can a true religious naturalist say "bless you" after someone sneezes?
Well, I'm sorry to disrupt the game, but
Okay.
I don't know if I can answer
Uh,
about a true religious
oh no.
Well,
naturalist.
yeah, yeah,
But can I guess I can answer it if you say,
Just
does Carol's notion of religious
yes. Okay.
yes.
naturalist?
Yes.
Carol's notion. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to be careful,
Oh
believe
no.
me.
No.
yeah, yeah,
So
Mhm.
I usually say Gesundheit.
Okay.
I go
yeah.
back to the German, and so what? Yeah, it's a cultural. For me, yeah, it's okay to say it.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay. So Yeah, the basis of this comes from the idea of the true Scotsman, the
Yeah,
logical
yeah,
fallacy where
yeah, yeah,
you avoid a problem by redefining it. So
yeah.
we're
Right.
doing it. It's cheeky,
Hmm.
and
I know, and
you
I'm
have to
sorry, I'm a little
cover.
too serious for
You
you.
can't, yeah, you
I
can't
see.
get in trouble for this
No,
stuff.
no, right, exactly. Yeah,
I know, and I know I won't get into trouble, and ultimately, I don't care
right.
if I
Yeah,
do get in trouble.
yeah, yeah,
Well, there's yeah,
It's
yes,
to have fun with it.
yes,
Okay, let's
yeah.
have
yes.
fun.
Well,
Okay.
in that case, maybe there is a chance someone could be punished for something in the afterlife.
Mm,
So, can a true religious naturalist believe in an afterlife?
Absolutely not.
okay.
Wow,
Okay.
that was pretty
Okay.
strong.
Right.
Well, yeah, because I mean, yeah, I mean, the afterlife is a speculative concept. It's not a naturalistic concept at all. So that was easy to answer.
Okay. Mm, yeah. Okay.
I like you too.
Uh,
I can tell. I wish we were in the same room. I
yeah.
can kind of
Yeah.
imagine.
All right. Okay. Can a true religious naturalist get married in a church or a place of worship?
I guess if that person wants to, if the two people want to.
Hmm.
However, yeah, yeah,
Mm. Okay.
Mm. Can a true religious naturalist reject science?
no,
No. Okay.
Oh. What can they reject a particular scientific finding?
no. If it's science, if it's empirically validated by the scientific method, you cannot reject it. Otherwise, it's not science. It's quack. I mean, as we all know, science is actually conducted by the empirical method, and the experimentation, the hypothesis has to be validated for it to be a scientific theory.
Man, these are the
Mm.
ones you come down
Yeah.
hard on.
Yeah.
It's only
Well, I
nine.
said it's grounded in a
Yes.
scientific view
Yeah,
of,
it
yeah,
it's almost
yeah.
like
I mean, if you,
definitional. You have to.
Mm.
well, it's naturalism. It's naturalism. Humanism is grounded in scientific investigation and validation.
Yeah. I guess with the caveat maybe that any sort of scientific finding could always be falsified at some point in the future.
Well, that's what science has.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the history of science.
Hmm. Hmm.
They used to believe in what is it, combustion, or
Yeah.
what is it,
What is
the,
the
the spontaneous
yes,
combustion,
yes, yes.
and it's been proven to be false.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. But at that time, it was the valid
Yeah.
scientific theory. Yeah, and again, that's why I began with the beautiful idea that the knowledge is always open to new forms of knowledge, and that's the beauty of it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. All right. Okay. Here's a challenging one. As if, well, the others were challenging too, but this in particular. Can a true religious naturalist eat meat?
I think there are some who do. I'm
Okay.
vegan, so I
Hmm.
don't.
Hmm.
Again, remember I was saying that it's up to each
Yes.
person to
Yes.
live
Uh-huh.
out. Yeah, so it depends on the person's own sense of how they connect to their kin animals and all. I'm what I call an aspirational vegan. I aspire to live out my convictions that other animals are just as valuable as me, so I don't want to violate their lives. So, and you have many different gradations of, conviction in that. And I know some religious naturalists who do eat meat. So, but I don't cast judgment on them.
All right. Well, can a true religious naturalist get vaccinated
For what?
for
That's a good point.
anything?
For anything.
And I think COVID in particular.
COVID.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh
All
me.
right. Okay.
This lightning round is
Easy.
funny.
All right. Okay.
The last one is about, can a true religious naturalist chop down a tree? And,
I
and I'm
guess
going to guess, yeah, it's up to
if
the
the person
individual.
wants to, and they'll have to live with the
Yes.
consequences of
Yes.
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh gosh, you two are funny.
But you, Carol, this is incredibly enlightening and
Thank you.
incredibly thoughtful. It's thought
Thank you.
provoking in the best
Yeah.
way.
Hmm.
Thank
Hmm.
you.
So this was
I had fun.
fascinating.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on.
Yes.
All right. So that was a lot of fun talking to Carol. Todd, what did you get out of this episode?
Dude, I think I'm in. I'm
Hmm.
totally on board. What about you? Are
Yeah, I think
you
so too. But yeah, I feel like I mean, I guess it's like maybe our worldview is pretty similar already to religious naturalism. Would you say?
probably? I think that one is it was a total curveball. It was not what I expected. And it is um I think like the science stuff, right? We make our own morality. We have to consider these things. um that's a big part of it. One of the things that, like, okay, that's the stuff that we kind of already agree with. One of the things she helped me understand are people who are spiritual. I think I have a better understanding of that now. People who think that there's something other than just humanity or beyond us or this force in the world. And the way Carol laid it out for us is like, yeah, it's everything. It is the universe, it's the world, it's nature, it's how things interact. And that's the key, right? And I think that's kind of where that's an answer for spiritual but not religious, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
Um,
something that spoke to you? Was there anything that it clarified your thinking, gave you that plus one?
um, I think like when she was talking about like the more, that definitely is interesting to me. I mean, because there are so many things we really don't understand about like the universe. Like, why is there a universe? Like, why do we exist? And we'll never. I mean, at least in our lifetime, we won't understand that fully. But science, maybe at some point in the future, we will have an answer for that. But I think it's like almost like sort of an embrace of that mystery is part of it, I think, and just sort of like embracing the not knowing yet. Whereas like more traditional theistic religions might say like it's God or something,
Yeah,
like provide
yeah, right.
provide a
That's always
simple
the answer.
answer.
Yeah.
I think in her worldview, I mean, or the religious naturalist worldview, I think um, it leaves a place for that kind of mystery, and
Yeah,
even
yeah, and just in
yeah.
awe,
Hmm.
things like that.
Yeah, and even I think this could be a defect of more like rigid kinds of like scientific atheism, where it's like you know um, to try and explain things that just haven't been explained yet, like why we exist. I mean, I know like Lawrence Krauss had that book. Um, I can't think of what the title is. Something like but like something
Yeah.
like why like why is there something rather than nothing? And I mean, and then I think the answer is like, well, it's just like quantum mechanics or something. Um, but it does feel like even to talk about like why are there laws of physics or something, like why do laws of physics exist? Um, yeah, I don't think maybe like science isn't there yet, and maybe it will never be. But yeah,
No, yeah, exactly. And I mean, even I would talk about simpler things, like when we're talking about like knowing one another, right? Like how you can know a person. I find that incredibly awesome. I find that much more awesome than the idea of a god, right?
yeah,
I find
yeah.
it incredible that I can turn my thoughts into words, turn them into sounds, and that when those sounds go in other people's ears, right? It's just those waves of air molecules. They go into other people's ears. It gets converted into a signal that goes to their brain, and they have the same thought.
Yeah,
That's
right.
absolutely incredible. That is
Hmm.
so much more interesting than burning bushes. And
Yes, yeah,
uh,
exactly. Yeah.
like, it's just not even, it's not on the same level at all. So yeah, finding that awe there. um I'm also like much more into that sort of relational intricate, like how we're defined by interconnectedness, not by being monads, not by being like some like life is people are not billiard balls on a table,
Yeah, right.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
Where we only have meaning by being interconnected, like language, right? If you're the only one who speaks that language is pointless.
Yes,
Anyway,
exactly. Yeah.
we could go on and on and on again, but these are two really good things. In the bonus material, the professor totally demolished the harm principle kind of easily. I was really in awe of that, and I love that she is so committed to it. Like this idea, like science is the truth. It tells us how we do it, and that's how we get our morality. It's an easy answer.
Um, the only thing is, I would say maybe like um, it is slightly more complicated because like I mean like I said in the lightning round, I think like just that scientific truths are always provisional. So it's or they could even be there are multiple competing scientific theories, and
Yeah,
it's
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
so
The
I yeah
evidence can
just
be ambiguous.
yeah exactly
Yeah,
yeah yeah
yeah.
hmm
And
hmm
like her response to that was like spot on, which is not, which I mean, it's something you have to train your brain to do. Where she said, if the science changes, your morality changes.
yeah yeah that's true
That's like, if that's that's a tough line, right? Like,
yeah that's true.
you
I
know,
mean yeah
and because like you said, we know that the science is going to change, and her answer to it is the morality changes.
yeah yeah I think yeah but then there is a yeah there a question though like um if there are competing hypotheses, how to choose between them, and because like the evidence may not be clear.
Yeah, yep, yep.
Mhm, mhm. But I don't think that's like really conflicts with anything she says necessarily. But yeah,
No, and I think it's pretty it's definitely where that limitation is. But the other thing is we've seen that in a lot of places. There are places now where the science needs to be updated and corrected, especially in like a lot of medicine. Um, but things like brain sizes, right? If you say that women's brains are too small to have deep thoughts, you know, there's you have to commit to a scientific investigation. Yeah,
oh
just
yeah, right, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think yeah. This is a tangent, but I mean like things like in like 18th century and 19th century science, the saying women's brains are smaller, or like that different races have different sized brains. I mean, that's just like it's bad science that can be answered with better science, rather than saying like science itself is suspect or something.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The answer is more science,
yeah, yeah.
right? And
hmm
that's a major commitment. And if that's where you're going to place your morality, that's you got to do
hmm
it right.
yeah,
Definitely.
that's the thing. Yeah,
Yeah. You
yeah.
know, look at what this has done to us, Nathan. Just like thinking about this worldview leads to just endless conversation about it. It's so thought provoking. I think like that's incredible. Oh man, and we could do this all night. Do you think we could post a 20-hour podcast? How would that go over?
Yeah. Could
One
be a
episode, 20 hours
marathon podcast or something.
of just
Yeah.
us ranting and chasing down other tangents as we go.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay. So what do we, Nathan? What do we need to plug this week? Who have we got? We've got Red Japan. Perfect as
Or
always.
Japan.
Red
Yes.
Japan is the same every
Yeah.
week.
hmm
Awesome.
Yeah. I think the big thing aside from Red Japan is that's yeah is the Patreon page, which we recently started, where you can subscribe and get different stuff, including access to the bonus content. So we had some bonus questions for Carol that isn't included in the main show, that you can access by becoming a patron. So check that out.
Yeah,
Um,
check it out. Drop some coin. Give it a listen.
yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's
And
plenty of
then
other
yeah.
goodies. The link and description will be below for the Patreon page.
Hmm. And yeah, just to encourage people to like and subscribe and rate and review, etc., etc.
Etc. Etc. Push the
Yeah.
button, ring the bell, pull the
Yes.
string, do all that stuff. Um, apply to Bucknell University, take classes with
Yeah.
Carol Wayne White.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, and we'll post like links to her book and some of the other stuff she's written. Um,
And
yeah.
thank you, the
Yes.
listeners.
Thanks to the listener. Yes.
We could
Yes.
not do this. We couldn't simply speak if people weren't listening,
Hmm.
weren't there.
No.
We're
No,
interconnected.
we're interconnected. Yes. Right. Okay. So we'll see everyone next time.